Hola, I'm Jorge Ramos.
And I'm Paula Ramos.
And welcome to The Moment. So, Paula, we're going to be doing things a little differently today. We're going to be answering the questions. And this happened after the election yesterday and 1 year after Donald Trump was reelected. And I think we want to see where the country is going and exactly what happened last night.
I think today, November 5th, Democrats woke up feeling hopeful. If some would even say that they woke up feeling something that they felt only during Barack Obama's 2008 victory, which is this idea that hope and change is once again possible for this party that I think we've talked about may have been going through some type of identity crisis. And so today, from New York City, where Zohar Mamdani wins, to New Jersey to Virginia, where both Democratic candidates won as governors, to California's Proposition 50, Democrats had a very, very big night yesterday. And so today we'll be talking about whether or not this victory is at a referendum on Trump. Is that actually a referendum on the Democratic Party? Is there a way forward when you have a Democratic socialist in New York City to moderates in New Jersey and Virginia? Is there a way forward for both of those entities to coexist in this Democratic Party? And how do Democrats keep going? But to do this today, we are going to do things slightly different. We will be joined by Daniel Alarcón, who's the executive producer of The Moment. He is someone that is literally putting this show together every single day. And he will be the one that's asking us questions today.
And we'll be right back.
Great. Welcome. So let's begin with probably the biggest result from last night, Jorge and Paula. Zohar Mamdani was a political unknown just a year ago, and he won the New York City mayoral race. It was a historic turnout, more than 2 million votes cast, and Mamdani beat back an independent run from former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Now, you both spoke with Mamdani here on The Moment, so you have a sense of who he is and what he represents. I want to hear just a clip from his victory speech last night, which was, and I know, Paolo, you were there, so you heard this, but let's play it.
New York will remain a city of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as of tonight, led by an immigrant.
So I guess I want to ask what his victory says about the political future of the country's largest city. And of course, whether we can extrapolate from this historic win any lessons for the national scene.
Yeah, Paula, you were there.
Yeah, let me start because so I was inside the room, right? I was inside the official victory party that Zohar Mamdani was having. And the energy that I think is palpable for listeners, and as you're hearing this, was exactly what people were feeling inside and outside. I mean, the room was absolutely packed. It was full of young people, millennials, Gen Zers, one of the most diverse crowds that I've ever seen. And what people kept saying, what stood out for me is that it felt very much like Obama's victory, right? No one mentioned Joe Biden, no one mentioned the 2020 election, but they mentioned that 2008 moment, which I think made a whole generation of people feel inspired again. And I think that's what I would say is one of the takeaways. Yes, of course, Zoran has a very dynamic message with that economic populism. Yes, he was able to mobilize voters, but I think more than anything, what people have been craving is some type of inspiration around this idea of change and hope, which I know that sounds cliche, but I think after all these years of Trumpism, after a Joe Biden administration, I think that is what's missing in Democratic politics, and this idea of inspiration.
It was very different. The moment was completely different. I think it's the best night. I don't know what you think, Daniel and Paola, but the best night for Democrats since Joe Biden won in 2020. It's just this perception, this optimism that victory is possible. I think Democrats have got used to losing so much that finally there was a night in which everything was completely different in Virginia, New Jersey, in California, in New York. And then that speech by Mamdani, Daniel, are we in the same country as Donald Trump? It feels completely different. It feels like like a different planet. Of course, in New York, in a city of 8.5 million people, you have more than 3 million immigrants. So it just makes sense that an immigrant now is going to be leaving the city. But the feeling and the sense that the country is changing is right there. And I think that the message to Donald Trump is very clear. It is, this is not your country. This is our country.
I think that was so key about his message, that he was so unapologetic, right? I think some people were expecting after his victory that he would somehow maybe soften his message or somehow meet moderates maybe in the middle. But I think that message was him presenting himself as exactly who he was, right? He once again reinforces that he is Muslim, that he is a democratic socialist, that he is young, and that he owns all of those labels. And I have to say that once I left the victory party and I got in a cab and I went from downtown Brooklyn over to Williamsburg, New York, which is where I live, my cab driver was a Pakistani, and he was celebrating. And he too was saying exactly that, how proud he was that an immigrant like him was mayor of this city. And so I think the energy is palpable. And like I said, I don't think this city, and I would say, Dad, even before Joe Biden, even Joe Biden's victory doesn't represent this, because this is, to me, this goes beyond Trumpism. No?
Well, I think a couple things there. I think the generational change is something worth pointing out. I mean, he's 34 years old, and that obviously excites a lot of people. And the other thing is, and I wonder, and this is a question, did he have to moderate if Cuomo was endorsed by Trump himself and Elon Musk and Stephen Miller and a lot of people who are not super popular in New York City? I mean, maybe he didn't have to tack to the center.
No, and I think that I would imagine may be an important lesson for Democrats, right? I think what I believe made a successful campaign was that he was rooted in a very clear-eyed ideology, right? That didn't really waver, right? And he said it, right? You know that he is for immigrants, he is for trans people, he wants to help Black people, and there's no wavering, It's very clear. And I think that type of ideology is what's missing at the national level, right? I think you hear Democrats across the country that are tiptoeing around party lines, but I think Zoran is someone that is very clear about where he stands. And I think you're right. I think there's no need. I think he wins precisely because of that, right? Because he didn't tiptoe as much as maybe some wanted him to.
Yeah. Some people might be saying that he's the new face of the Democratic Party. Well, in a sense it is, but I think the Democratic Party is just really too broad. I know we're going to be talking, Daniel, about what happened in New Jersey and in Virginia. But if you see the candidates in those two states, they were centrist. I mean, they were not like Mamdani. So I think the challenge, which is a good challenge, is a good problem to have for Democrats, is going to be what kind of party we want to be. Are we going to be the party of Mamdani, or are we going to be the party that we saw in New Jersey and in Virginia? Obviously, part of the problem with Democrats is the lack of message. I think Mamdani had said that the party needed an affirmative message. Well, the message is completely there. The question is going to be, should you go to the center? I still remember Bill Clinton used to say that the elections in the United States, you got to win them in the center. In other words, that you would need voters from both parties in order to win. But in this case, that's not the case. Mamdani won on the extreme of the party. In New Jersey and Virginia, it was different. Still, it was a great night for Democrats.
Yeah, I wonder if Bill Clinton's axiom is still true in the post-Trump era, in the Trump era.
What do you think, Daniel? You think it's doesn't apply anymore?
I certainly don't think that, Trump never tacked to the center to win an election. I think what he did successfully is move the Overton window of what's acceptable political discourse to the right. And not even to the right, to this kind of trollish populism that is what we've been seeing from, and even more so, we saw it in the first administration, but we see it even more so now, where you have, government agencies tweeting out, your mother back to reporters. And so it's not even ideological. It's more just like almost a cultural shift. And so I wonder, I honestly, and it's a question that I think about a lot, that idea of moving to the center. Is it a viable or necessary political option anymore? And I'm not totally sure it is.
But let's also not forget that Zoran also was in part because of Trump supporters, right? One of the things that he's able to do during the primaries this summer was that he, as we've discussed in this show, right? He performs really well in the precincts where Donald Trump wins in 2024. Again, like, people think of New York City as this anomaly or as this like progressive liberal bastion, but the truth is that we have a pretty complex political history where the two out of the last four mayors in this city have been Republicans, right? Eric Adams is a former Republican. We elected a former cop. This is a place where Donald Trump did extremely well. Kamala Harris only wins by 37 points. And so the only way that Zoran created this coalition is not just by mobilizing a Barack Obama-esque coalition or young people, but it is also by tapping into that Trump supporter, that resonates with Zoran's economic populism. And so I think that is a new way forward for a democratic progressive socialist to be able to expand that tent. Like that, there's something to study there. And perhaps the question is, do you have to go to the center? Perhaps the question is, are Democrats comfortable with allowing both identities and both type of approaches to coexist in the party, right? Does it have to be either or?
Yeah.
And maybe that's the way forward.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I keep thinking about Jorge, what Ruben Gallegos told us when we spoke to him on The Moment, that really authenticity is what people respond to. And
I think definitely Zoran was his videos were completely viral. And I think that's part of the reason why he won. Also, I think overall there's a message against Donald Trump. I think it's not only that Mamdani won; it is also telling President Trump this is not what we want. This is not what we voted for. I was doing my homework. I saw a CNN poll. Really interesting. 47% of registered voters say they would pick a Democrat in the election, if the election were today, in contrast with only 42% of Republicans. And the disapproval of President Trump is incredible. It's 63% of Americans don't agree with him. And when you go step by step, 68% say that the country is in bad shape, and 61% blame President Trump for the situation of the economy. Now we have to remember that we're right in the middle of the shutdown, so voters are reacting to that. It is not only politics and ideology. It is, hey, I don't have a check today. It is, if I'm going to travel, it is going to be maybe 3 hours, as it happened at the airport in Houston. So the message to Trump, I think, it is very clear. One has to do with maybe it's the Trump effect, that if Trump is not on the ballot, Republicans are having a really hard time just to get elected. And the second one is that this is not the country we expected to be in.
I have a question for I think all those points are really valid. And I am also, as a sometime New Yorker, concerned because Trump has been pretty explicit with his threats about what would happen if Mamdani were to win. Now we have Mamdani as mayor-elect. January 1st, he will be the mayor of New York City. And Trump has been, very threatening on social media about what he intends to do. And we've seen what's happened in Chicago, in Los Angeles, in Portland, and other sort of cities led by Democrats. So, Paula, you live in New York. Are you concerned? Should New Yorkers be worried about what's to come in terms of ICE, in terms of funding cuts?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what's going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and this is something that people talk about constantly, right? Like even yesterday, people were celebrating, but then one of the expressions I kept hearing is, "Oh, we're going to go to war with Washington D.C." Right, and they use those words. I think just even if you kind of take a step back, like Donald Trump is someone that governs with revenge and with retribution. And Donald Trump is someone that has beyond Zoran, a very complicated relationship, a love-hate relationship with New York City. Donald Trump was born in New York City. He's from Queens, and yet he is rejected by his city. And so I think he's always kind of had this, this love-hate. Remember that he indicted New York's Attorney General, Letitia James. So his eyes are now set on, I think, this individual that is now the antithesis, not just of who he is, but at a national level, right? Like Zoran has all the qualities. Almost, it reminds me of Barack Obama, right? Like Donald Trump is so envious of a Barack Obama figure, right? Like he's always been obsessed with him, and every other sentence, every other year, he's someone that is constantly attacking Barack Obama. No one really understands why, but I think we're about to see the same thing with Zoran. Is I think what New Yorkers can expect, and what they do expect, is Donald Trump 2.0. Right, where the ICE raids that we've seen, the deployment of the national troops, that intensity in which he's governing through immigration enforcement, like we're about to see all of that playing out in New York City. And so I think the question then becomes for Zoran, how does he ensure that New York City continues to be a sanctuary city, which we've almost lost touch and sense of what that even means, because Eric Adams has, of course, really blurred the lines of what a sanctuary city is supposed to mean these days. But I think New Yorkers are expecting exactly that.
Yeah, and the confrontation is about to begin, Daniel. I think we have to remember that Donald Trump is calling Zoran Mamdani my little communist. And of course, he's trying to confuse the terms communist with socialism. But also we have to remember that in New York City is a sanctuary city. That means that the city is supposed to protect immigrants, to protect more than 3 million immigrants. I was seeing some of the numbers. There are about 400,000 New Yorkers right now at this moment that are facing deportation. 400,000. So the question is, what is Mamdani gonna be doing? Being a sanctuary city means that the local police should not cooperate with ICE agents, and we're not talking about the National Guard right now. Obviously, Donald Trump might want to send the National Guard to New York. But
he will try so hard.
He will, and we'll see what happens in the courts and if he follows the rules and so on. But the important thing is what's going to happen with the local police. Mamdani is going to order the New York police, unless something dramatic changes. He's going to tell them, you cannot cooperate with ICE agents. Simply, you cannot do that. And that's going to be the confrontation. And right in the middle of everything is 400,000 people in New York who are facing deportation and who are in danger. There's going to be terror in the city, and maybe that's the element that Donald Trump wants to use for Mamdani and say, hey, look, this is what you voted for, and now you have a city that's completely in disarray.
I think that's a really good point, because I think that's where Trump thrives off that narrative, right? So yes, this is a victory for Democrats. Yeah, and I think that's like, remember that during the last midterm elections, the narrative that came out of the Republican Party was crime, crime, crime. And so to now have, a self-declared progressive, democratic, socialist Muslim in New York City gives Trump the perfect opportunity, the perfect story, right? The perfect story to paint New York City as this communist-run, chaotic city in decline. And so I think you're right. I think there's a flip side to this story.
Yeah. I want to shift to California, which is, voted last night in favor by 60%, I believe, in favor of Proposition 50, which creates new boundaries for California's 52 congressional districts. This is a big vote. This is a big win for the Democrats. This new congressional map would cancel out the 5 or so Republican seats that Texas redrew in their favor back in June. So I have a couple of questions about this. I want to understand from your point of view the kind of national strategy behind this, but part of me, and not a small part, really worries that while I understand why this was done, why the Democrats pushed this, why Newsom pushed this, Governor Gavin Newsom, I also wonder if we're at risk as a nation of gerrymandering ourselves into permanent political gridlock. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
It is important. I think that the first lesson, Daniel, I think it is that Democrats finally responded. For months after Trump took over the White House, there was no response, and the Democratic Party was completely invisible. As a matter of fact, I think the three of us, we had conversations in which we were asking ourselves, who's the leader of the Democratic Party? Nobody knows. Nobody really knows. So Gavin Newsom said, let's take the challenge. And then he started with videos. He started making fun of President Trump, and he hates that so much. Paula, by the way, you were asking why Trump hates Obama so much. Well, there was a speech in 2011 in which Obama made fun of Trump, and he kept that many years later. And then he ran for president, obviously in 2015, and now he's obviously the president of the United States. But going back to California, Daniel, where I live and where I feel really, really at home, I think Californians and Gavin Newsom is saying, okay, this is the only game in town. What should we do? If they're going to be restricting everything in Texas, then should we just wait passively and do nothing, or should we do exactly the same thing? So the game is on, and Gavin Newsom thinks that that's the only way to deal with Trump, because otherwise, what would happen, Daniel? It would be only Texas gaining members of Congress.
Right. No, I hear you. It's basically sort of like what I think this represents is and tell me if I'm wrong, is this idea that the Democrats were finally willing to get their hands dirty and do something that previously they were like, oh no, that we can't go that far. That's never been done, and they're playing by these rules, whereas the Republicans certainly weren't.
And I think the rules of engagement have changed, right? Like there are, and sure, maybe there's like a dangerous side to this, to your point, Daniel. But in the Trump era, those rules have changed. And so the question for Democrats are you going to play by the rules, or do you try to out-Trump Trump using his own strategies? And I think given how popular and given how many people voted for this proposition, I think, once again, there's an appetite for Democrats to act with a little bit more of spine, to be almost as ruthless as Republicans have been. And I use the word ruthless because I think the idea of gerrymandering isn't new, right? Like, gerrymandering is a very old tactic that has been weaponized by both parties. I mean, Democrats have also traditionally done that, but Republicans have historically been more ruthless about the way in which and when they gerrymander, from Texas to Colorado, Georgia, North Carolina. And so now, the question is, in Trump era, in a moment in which even we have an administration that is even openly flirting with the idea of a third term, wherein they are so hungry to hold on to power, how do you respond to that? And I think part of the answer is that you can't really answer that question without out-trumping Trump and using his own strategies. And it kind of seems like it's working.
And I share your concerns, Daniel. This is dirty politics. Obviously, this is not the perfect scenario, but these are not normal times. It's not normal politics. I think we are, with the election of Zoran Mamdani, with what happened in New Jersey and Virginia, in California, it's the time for confrontation. I think that's exactly what we're seeing now. We're going to see a Democratic Party that is going to feel invigorated, that is going to feel stronger, and that is going to be willing to tackle Donald Trump. Trump is going to use probably revenge and all the power in his government to try to change things. And so I think the next year is going to be incredibly difficult. And obviously, at the end, we're thinking November 2026. We're thinking what's going to be happening in the midterm elections and the possibility that Democrats would regain either the Senate or the House, because that would be the only way to compensate what we're seeing. But the next year is going to be brutal. The next year is going to be incredibly difficult. It's going to be dirty politics. It's going to be, there's no possibility of conversation, no possibility of dialogue. Let's put aside politics. Let's think about the government and the shutdown. 36 days in which we are not seeing Democrats and Republicans just sitting in a room right now in a hotel in New York or in Washington, D.C., just talking, because at the end we know the budget has to be there. They have to find a way to solve their differences, and we're not seeing that. And not even the intention to do that. So I think the next year is going to be incredibly complicated. This is not going to be. It is not normal. And I agree with you, Daniel. It is. I don't like what's happening in California the same way I don't like what's happening in Texas. But they're using all the power that they have in order just to change things in their favor.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about a little bit. Most of our audience is Latino, or much of our audience is Latino, and I want to ask, like, these for example, this redistricting, does it do anything to improve the lives of Latinos in the United States, given that it could tilt an election a year from now, a national election a year from now?
I mean, I think it arguably, at least in California, I think the idea is to counter what Republicans are doing. One of the consequences of what they're doing in Texas is that they're minimizing and reducing the power of Black and brown voters in Texas. And so, in a way, I think part of the strategy is to regain part of that power, part of that political power. And so, at least politically, I think symbolically, right? This is all symbolic. I think symbolically, the idea is to counterweight that. So I think yes, but I don't know how all of this, directly transfers into a direct impact towards Latino beyond just this like symbolic political power.
Yeah, but at the end, I think it is important. It's a matter of representation. It is overall. Let's talk about the whole country. We're about 68 million Latinos in the United States. And we're about 20% of the population. So ideally, and that's just ideally, we should have about 20% of representation everywhere, and we don't have that. I mean, you would have to sit in the Senate. It's not there. You would have to sit in the House. It is in there, and not even in states like California or Texas or New York, where you have so many Latinos. So at the end, I think it is important. In California, it's going to be the changes in district. That means maybe 5 more seats for Democrats, and maybe those 5 seats would make the difference in November 2026 in the midterm elections. So they're going to be playing hard. They're going to be playing dirty.
Yeah, Jorge, you mentioned the shutdown, which is now officially the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Democrats swept. We mentioned Mamdani in New York. We mentioned Prop 50 in California. Abigail Spanberger won in Virginia, a pretty resounding victory. Mikey Sherrill won what was going to be, or many people thought was going to be, a tight race in New Jersey. She's the new governor of New Jersey. So do all of these wins nationally, do they change anything about the political calculus for those senators and those representatives and in the White House, the people that need to negotiate to end this shutdown?
Well, I think the main message, I think it is, yes, we want change. I think what we saw last night is that people everywhere, in New Jersey, Virginia, California, New York, they're saying we want change. We want something completely different. In the case of Mamdani, I think it's the anti-Trump. But you might not see that everywhere. But I think the message, and I've seen the polls, the same ones that you've seen, the same numbers. People are blaming more Republicans than Democrats for the shutdown of the government. And the reason is very simple. They control everything. They control the White House. They control both chambers of Congress. And so I think, I don't know exactly how, but I think Republicans, after this message, I think they're going to be pushed just to do something completely different. At the end, it is incredible. How come we are in a country, the richest country in the world, the most powerful country in the world? And I was seeing the SNAP benefits. 42 million people receive coupons just to eat. At the most, they might get $292 if everything goes right a month. Who can live with $292 a month? And that's where we are right now. So it is. We have reached a moment in which it is difficult to see this country as not only the richest but the most generous. Look what we're doing with those that need our help the most. And there's not a single intention of conversation right now between Democrats and Republicans. It is incredible.
Yeah, I think when you look at the results in New Jersey and in Virginia, I think that is a direct consequence of the way in which voters are feeling Donald Trump's economic agenda, right? And the pain of that economic agenda. And I think particularly in Virginia, it's a place that is home to over 300,000 federal workers. And so they have felt probably more than any state the consequences of Doge and Elon Musk. And they're feeling every day the consequences of the government shutdown. And then you go to a state like New Jersey, where I believe a couple of days ago, the governor of New Jersey declared an emergency because of the SNAP benefits and because it's a population that has a significant segment of constituents that are part of these SNAP benefits. And so I think those are two states that perhaps Democrats didn't win because of this very, clear-eyed anti-Trump message that you saw here in New York City. But it is a testament to the way in which people are feeling the consequence of Trump in a different way. And so I think one of the questions that I was having yesterday is how much of these votes in a state like Virginia and New Jersey, how much of that is for Democrats versus against Trump's economic agenda, right? And I think that then is what sustains Democrats' victory in the midterms and then in the general election. But I think for sure New Jersey and Virginia are clear examples of the economic pain that people are feeling across the country.
And if I may add some numbers about the Latino vote, which is something that we always care about. New Jersey, 21% of 21% of Latinos. Virginia, 10% of Latinos. New York City, 29% of Latinos. So I know I've said that for many years that no one can make it to the White House without the Latino vote. Now it seems that with these huge numbers, you really cannot be governor or member of Congress or a senator without the Latino vote and without considering the incredible strength of Hispanics.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what this last crazy year we've had since Trump's election last November. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to The Moment. Let's zoom out a little bit. It's been a full year since the 2024 elections. And in a lot of ways, the outcome of that election is why we're all here doing this show. This is why we started The Moment, to have a place to talk about what, as a country, we'd be living through. We're not going to list all the ways that Donald Trump has trampled on the rule of law or attempted to undermine democracy. We could spend an hour doing that. But I did want to ask you, is there anything that's happened that he's done or that his administration has done in the last year that you didn't expect? Is there anything really surprising?
You want to start, Paola, with a list?
No, you know what? No. I oftentimes I hear so many people saying, oh, this isn't what voters voted for, right? Particularly when it comes to the immigration raids. And the truth is, this is exactly what Donald Trump said he would do. Right, he was very clear about his mass deportation agenda. He was very clear about the way in which he was going to not respect power and the rule of law. And he was very clear. And so, I'm not surprised about the way in which they're doing it or what they're doing. I am perhaps a bit surprised around how fast everything is happening, right, and how orchestrated and coordinated they are. And I think we've had this conversation. They've had 4 years to plan this, and I have to say, from that perspective, and Anthony Romero talked to us about this, right, from the ACLU. It is a very organized machine, and I think what is surprising, maybe to me, is just how open they are about the ultimate goal and the ultimate agenda, right? And how unapologetic they are about the way in which they want to change this country. And they won't stop until they achieve that.
Yeah, I remember the GOP convention, they had signs that said mass deportations now. And
now.
Yeah, and if Trump 1 was malice tempered by incompetence, Trump 2 is, they have a plan, a playbook, and they're following it to a T. Jorge, you live in Miami. Where many Latinos in Florida voted enthusiastically for Trump. And some of them have been surprised by the really harsh immigration tactics that they expected wouldn't be used on them. Have you seen a shift over this last year in how those voters think about the president?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I would like to point out. First, about the elections result. I know we're talking about New Jersey and Virginia and New York, but here in Miami, Eileen Higgins, a Democrat, is going to be in the runoff with Emilio Gonzalez. By the way, I got my master with Emilio Gonzalez, so I know him pretty well. So it's going to be interesting to see the runoff for the first time. Daniel, in 28 years, a Democrat she's going to be able to be the mayor of Miami. So that there's a shift. In going back directly to your question, many people here in Miami, especially Cubans, Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, they supported, some of them couldn't vote, but they supported Donald Trump because they thought that he was going to do something with the dictatorships in those countries. And then when Donald Trump was saying, I'm going to be deporting millions, or I'm going to try to deport millions, many people from Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, they thought, oh, no, he's not talking about me. Yeah, he was talking about them directly. He was talking about them. So right now, you were asking me if I'm surprised by something that has happened in the last year. Yeah, the sense of betrayal among Cubans and Venezuelans. I never thought in a city like Miami, where I've been for more than 30 years, would be deporting people back to a dictatorship. And that's been happening with Venezuelans. Many Cubans are in Mexico, Paula. You were there, right? Recently.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I just
they've
got
been
back
deported.
from...
They've been deported to Mexico. So I don't think Venezuelans and Cubans, especially, are willing to not only feel betrayed, but go from supporting the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. I think that's a way. That's a different step. But the sense of betrayal with President Trump is very clear right here.
Paula, you've reported. You wrote a terrific book about this kind of Latino shift to the right that your dad was just talking about. But now you've been reporting and going back to some of those places where the reporting of the book comes from, the Rio Grande Valley, Eagle Pass, et cetera. So have you seen a shift there over the last year?
I think it's too soon to tell, right? I think the question that we're all thinking about, and even if you look at these election results, right? Like even New Jersey, one of the reasons that New Jersey was such a close victory and such a close battleground is because of the Latino vote, right? Like Donald Trump is able to flip some counties in New Jersey in 2024 because of Latino voters. But I think the question that we all have is, are those Latino Trump supporters feeling some type of remorse? And if so, are they public about it? And if so, does that translate into a vote for Democrats? And I generally think it's too early to tell. But what I am finding on the ground, whether it's in Pennsylvania, I spent a lot of time in Allentown and Reading, the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. I've talked to voters in South Florida. What I can tell you is that people feel very conflicted and they don't yet know how to make sense of all of these different feelings, right? Because it's a feeling that is both rational and also emotional, and nothing really makes sense. What I mean is that these are people that on paper supported mass deportations. In theory, they are okay with the idea of mass deportations. But in practice, they're now starting to feel, to your point, Dad, they're starting to feel uncomfortable around the way in which Donald Trump is doing it, and uncomfortable around feeling that they too suddenly feel like those immigrants that Donald Trump was talking about. Now, I think what's interesting is that people are coming to that conclusion in different ways. I think in a place like Pennsylvania, people are feeling the sort of economic impact of the mass deportations. Like I've been to so many barbershops where they're like, oh, we sort of still support this, but it's really not good for business, right? Then you go to a place like the Rio Grande Valley where there the sentiment is one of humiliation. I think there's a lot of Latino voters that feel humiliated about the way in which they are feeling in their own communities, even asking these questions of like, well, am I American enough? Like, am I suddenly not part of sort of Donald Trump's America? And then I think in a place like Miami, where I have talked to Cuban Trump supporters who now have loved ones deported in either Mexico or Cuba themselves, I think the feeling there is betrayal. But I think what's interesting is that in every other conversation with these voters, the sense of fear that Trump was able to inspire in them in 2024 is still somewhat there, right? Like in every other sentence, they'll talk about this idea of crime, right? This idea of like that crime is still present in the streets and that some people do need to get out. And so I think that is still very much intertwined in the thought process. And I think it's too early now. Are they shifting? Maybe, but towards what?
Yeah, and el miedo is everywhere. Yeah. And another thing that has surprised me is the brutality of the raids. It is what we're seeing, mass agents without ID, without warrants, just detaining even American citizens. And it is not true that the vast majority of the people they're detaining and deporting have criminal records. That is not true. Absolutely, absolutely not. So just those images. I mean, I'm seeing them every single day, and I never imagined the United States to be that country.
Yeah, Jorge, I'm so glad you brought this up because, I read a lot of the media that you read, and the papers and the analysts, and I watch the news, and I keep feeling like we're talking about this constitutional crisis that's coming, and everything is described as unprecedented and concerning and alarming. But I'm also seeing people, as you said, getting pulled off the street by masked agents, kidnappings, secuestros, that feel very reminiscent of the most violent dictatorships that we've seen in Latin America. They feel very reminiscent and very frightening. And so I guess I just keep wondering, it's like I keep hearing the chattering classes saying, "Oh, we're getting to this point. It's so concerning," when I feel like we've been here. It's happening. Isn't this the constitutional crisis that we've all been worried about?
Well, we Latino Americanos, we know how to detect that. I mean, remember, I left Mexico when Mexico was not a democracy. So you see the signs everywhere, not the attacks on journalists, the attacks on the judges, on politicians, the personal revenge. I'm seeing it everywhere. Not paying attention to what the law says. Now, having said that, I think we still have freedoms here in the United States. Maybe it's just mi alma de inmigrante, but I still believe that at the end this country will do the right thing. In other words, just because we are being critical right now doesn't mean that the three of us are going to end up in jail tomorrow. That's the big difference. Yeah, I'm seeing signs of authoritarianism everywhere. And I think last night was an incredible signs of resistance. They're saying, no, this is not the country that we want. And the signs of resistance are not only the results yesterday, but also the 7 million people who protested about a week ago, or a little more than a week ago, in many 2,700 cities in the United States. So even though, yes, I see what you're saying, Daniel, I'm also seeing that the resistance is growing, and that's a few voices. Mamdani, what we're seeing in New Jersey, in Virginia, new voices are coming, and a new generation is coming. Not people my age. Is the new generation, people who are saying we need new leadership, and the new leadership is in New York City right now.
Yeah, I think America has always had this almost like this identity crisis, right? And this like constant conundrum, asking the question, like, what does this American democracy mean? And the way that we answer it is by extremes, right? On every 4 years, we have these kind of extremes. Some people answer it through Trumpism, and here we are once again with like a democratic resistance that is trying to answer that question again. But I think what is evident, at least to me, is that America as we know it, or America as it is supposed to be, a democratic nation with all these principles and freedoms, in my opinion, is no longer here, right? You look at media companies, you have some of our colleagues that are self-censoring. You have law firms and universities that are willing to negotiate with Trump. You have immigration agents in this country that are suddenly not as worried about law and order and more worried about being loyal to Donald Trump. You have an asylum system in this country that is absolutely gone. Not only that, you have a Trump administration that is designing an immigration system, actively designing it by expulsing Black and brown people while being very open about the idea of integrating white refugees into this country. And so I think the country as we know it, or as some of us believe that it is supposed to function, in that sense, it's gone. But I do think that doesn't mean that we're, that this democracy is gone forever, but it does mean that we are capable of pushing this country to an extreme that I have to say, like, growing up, I never thought, that this country was once again capable of going back to, to I think some of these darker roots that have always been part of the United States. This capacity to see some people as inferior, this capacity to, go around the system, this capacity to defy the Constitution, and we're capable of that.
Yeah. So maybe what's interesting, Daniel, by listening to Paola, is that we've been discussing that, Paola, for such a long time, and it seems that you're more pessimistic than I am about what's happening in this country. I don't know. Maybe, and we'll talk about the American dream on another podcast. But I'm still optimistic. Maybe it's because this country gave me the opportunities that my country of origin couldn't give me. I still believe that at the end, we'll do the right thing. Because that has been my experience, but your experience clearly has been completely different. And another thing that I really appreciate is the possibility, the capacity to respond to what we are seeing. While in other dictatorships that I cover as a journalist or in authoritarian governments, I didn't see that possibility of response.
I want to get into all of that and the optimism and the kind of generational divide, which is one of the reasons we started this show, of course. But first, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about the moment itself and what we've learned over these last several months working together. So we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to The Moment. I'm Daniel Alarcón, executive producer of this show, and I'm super happy to have Paula and Jorge here. We have been working on this show for a couple months. Actually, we launched a couple months ago. We started working on this almost a year ago. And Jorge, you've mentioned repeatedly that at some point in the future, people are going to ask what we did during the Trump years. And your response again and again has been this show. So I want you to unpack that idea a little bit. What do you mean by this idea that this show is a response to the Trump administration or Trump 2.0?
Yeah, I think I do believe, and I've said that many times, that in just a few years from now, our colleagues, our friends, our family members, they're going to be asking my son and daughters, they're going to be asking me, so what do you do during those years? I mean, we've been describing what's happening with immigrants in this country, what's been happening with all the attacks on the institutions. And so I think we have to, you cannot remain silent. To be a journalist, this is not a profession to be silent. And my answer to what I don't like, it is reporting about it. It is denouncing about it. It is criticizing about it. I think as a journalist, we have two responsibilities. One is to report reality as it is, not as we wish it would be. But the second and most important one is to challenge those who are in power. So my response to the questions, what do you do during those years, is this: independent journalism, the freedom to say whatever you think it is necessary, and to report with precision, but with bravery when you need it. And I think this is my response.
Yeah. Paula, how has it felt working with your father and being, interviewing some of these incredible voices we've had to interview? But, I can't imagine doing it with my dad. Like, is that a weird situation?
Di la verdad, Paola.
Di la verdad.
No puedo. No, I'm kidding. No. It's been, I think we're both learning so much.
Yeah.
I think what's been interesting is that we know each other obviously better than anyone, but I think I have to say, like, I'm learning new things about you. I'm learning new things about yeah, like even the way that we approach conversations, the way that we ask questions, the things that we're both interested in. But at the end, it somehow goes back to, I think, what was the original intention of the show, right? To prove that we can have intergenerational conversations and that we can have different sort of opinions about these issues. But I think that's exactly, at least what I'm hearing out there, that's exactly what I think the audience is craving for, right? I think of the first conversation we had in the show. Right, we started with a historic figure that today is making history. And I think even that conversation, right, where we were talking to him about democratic socialism, where we were talking to him and having him and trying to hold Zoran accountable about how he was going to govern, but at the same time, understand the hope that he saw and whatever light he saw and whatever path forward he saw. And even in that conversation, I think I learned a lot from you, Dad, and like the things that you were kind of more skeptical about and the things that you wanted to press him on. And I think that speaks to what makes this show different. What do you think?
Can I jump in there? One thing that I've noticed, and I'm glad you mentioned Zoran, in a couple of our conversations, the phrase "the democratic socialist" comes up. And I feel like I'm a little closer to your age, Paula. Our generation doesn't necessarily bother us, that phrase. And Jorge, you seem to have piquiña whenever the phrase democratic socialist is mentioned. Yeah,
Explain
it's like
that word.
You feel uncomfortable. You feel uncomfortable when the phrase is said. Maybe for people of my generation and younger, the things Zoran Mamdani says don't seem particularly radical. They seem ambitious. They seem idealistic, but they don't seem that radical. But I've heard you in several conversations with Zoran, with John Leguizamo, even when Ruben Gallego mentioned it.
Yeah.
You sort of have a visceral reaction to the phrase democratic socialism, and I just want you to talk about that.
I do understand democratic socialist in El Partido Socialista Obrero Español with Pedro Sánchez in Spain. They're democratic socialists, and in Scandinavian countries, prime minister are constantly democratic socialists. So I have no problem with democracy, and I have no problem with social democrats. Remember, I've been in Miami for more than 3 decades. So here in Miami, when you come to Miami and for the politicians, there's always un bautizo. And el bautizo means that they're going to be asked, what do you think about the dictatorship in Cuba? And now not only that, but now the question is, what do you think about the dictatorships in Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua? That's one thing. That's why I'm so sensitive to that, because I'm surrounded by people that were fleeing repressive governments, and they fear for their lives. Also, on a personal basis, I had the opportunity to talk to dictators. Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, Nicolás Maduro, who arrested me and deported me from Venezuela, even just a few seconds with Fidel Castro. So I know what dictators do, and I know how repressive they are, how they kill people, how they put people in prison. So I'm very sensitive to that. And when I ask that question constantly, what do you think about those dictatorships? It is just to find out what kind of person I'm talking to. Because I think you can be a democratic socialist, but it is not acceptable at all to support or defend dictatorships like the one I've seen in Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. That's why I'm always asking that question.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I think I have a certain... I just remember 2020 when if you read the Republican rhetoric about Biden, you would think he was Che Guevara.
Communist. I mean, that's what they would say.
Yeah,
I mean, that's literally what they said.
And then, you have this, mild-mannered elderly man who, let the FBI investigate his son for 4 years, did not have any authoritarian tendencies whatsoever. So I guess the label to me, it seems so ridiculous when it's used from the right to attack anyone who is, in the center or left. It's almost like one of those adjectives that means nothing. To call Zoran, for example, a jihadist, communist, is so preposterous that I just don't. It doesn't affect me. I don't know, Paula.
No, yeah, I mean, look, I think the for decades. I mean, it is the oldest Republican tactic to label Democrats, and of course you see this more in South Florida, but you see it now in New York. The oldest Republican tactic. I mean, the Red Scare, right? To label any Democrat as a socialist or a communist because it works, and we have a history of doing that in this country. And so I think for us as journalists, it's a question of like how do you feed into that narrative or not. And also, I think particularly with someone like Zoran, understanding our audience and understanding that some of our audience and some of the Latinos that we talk to are people that do have some type of political trauma with Venezuela or with Cuba. And these are issues that they're talking about. And so I think our job is to kind of help them, make sense of what this quote unquote scary term actually means. Right, and to distinguish and make a distinction between communism, socialism, and democratic socialism. And I think what we're seeing now happening in this city is that Republicans, Independents, and Democrats have an appetite for this type of idea, right? Which is really and simply about expanding wealth, and that has been, that was, I think, at the heart of what, like we said at the beginning of the show, what mobilized even Trump supporters towards Zoran Mamdani, which is very much at the same time Donald Trump's agenda, which I think is so funny because one of the things that Zoran kept saying yesterday before his victory is, look, at the end of the day, I want the same thing that Donald Trump won on, right? Like what I'm saying is the same thing that Donald Trump was talking about at the beginning, about sort of, going against the establishment, ensuring that, the low income, middle class people have access to wealth. Like that is very much the type of populism that made Donald Trump, have this resounding victory in 2024. And so it's a matter of really breaking down these stereotypes. And I think that's what we strive for in this show.
Yeah. I just a couple more questions before we wrap. What are you hearing from Latinos about the show? What are you hearing from audience, people giving you feedback for the show?
I think we need more spaces like this. Part of what we do, I know it's a cliche, but part of what we do is to give voice to those who don't have a voice. And whenever there's something that has to do with politics and that there's an intersection with Latinos, we want to be there. I think that's why the show is important, because we need more spaces, no less. We need more spaces like this one to have a conversation, especially after what happened in the last night and in the middle of the shutdown of the government. We need to have dialogue o conversación, and I think that's what's so important. And again, it's a matter of representation. We have to tell our own story, and the only way to do it is through programs like this.
Yeah, I've had honestly really, really good feedback. I think some people say that it feels that they're just like at the dinner table, right, with like three people, and that things feel familiar in a way, right? I think oftentimes they're like, oh, we're so happy that you asked him that question, right? With Zoran or Senator Ruben Gallego. And at the same time, I think people feel hopeful. They also, I think, sometimes feel like we're answering some of the questions that they're having. I think because they're so used to seeing both you and I, Dad, in these sort of like TV settings, to be able to have these like longer conversations that are more nuanced, that are more complex. I think, to your point, I think people are craving that type of space, particularly now. And so, I mean, so far, I think it's been really good.
And thanks for making that possible, Daniel, and Radio Ambulante and iHeart. Really, it's just great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. I have one last question, and I know you're both incredibly busy, and I know this in particular because Laura, Miguel, and Lisa and I are the ones often trying to wrangle you guys to schedule. So I know this. You're both incredibly busy, and you got tons of stuff you're working on. So I just want to ask you, just as journalists, what are you working on outside of the moment that you're just super excited about?
No, yeah, I'm doing a podcast in Spanish every single day. So I'm reinventing myself after 38 years being on TV. I needed to do something else just to survive as a journalist, as an independent journalist. So I'm very excited the possibility of having this podcast and also having another one, a daily one, a podcast in Spanish. So that's what I'm working on every single day. I think I'm working harder than ever in my life, and that's a lot.
Because you can't stop, because you don't know how to. Because
well,
a journalist
not
never
that,
stops,
but
you
I
don't know
have
how
a
to
boss
stop.
now. No tengo un jefe.
Oh,
So
yeah.
now it's on me, and
Wow.
it's a different kind of weight that I never had before.
Paula, I love that you were accusing your father of being a workaholic subtly
Pues sí, es a
when you were
workaholic,
absolutely
claro.
as hard a worker
no.
as
Tú también,
your
Oh,
dad.
Daniel,
yeah.
no digas nada,
Of
que tú
course.
estás igual. Mira
I'm
dónde
not
estás.
being interviewed here, Jorge.
Yes, and on my free time, I've been exploring a new book idea, which is, it goes back to a lot of the themes that we've discussed in this show, which is I've been following like 3 different families that have either self-deported or have reverse migrated or are thinking of that. And so I'm trying to understand like the long-term effect of having a whole new generation or wave of immigrants that lets go of this American dream and this idea that we keep talking about in this show. And so that's what I've been doing in all my spare time.
Yeah, all of that copious amounts of spare time. I can't wait to read that. And I just want to say on behalf of everyone at Raambulante and iHeart, what a privilege it's been to have you guys, run this show and be the voices and interlocutors with some of the great people we've been able to interview. It's been a pleasure for me as well. Thanks for your insight today. We'll be back next week with our regular format. So Thank you. Gracias.
Gracias, Daniel. Gracias.
Thanks, Daniel.
Bye, boys.
The Moment is a production of Raambulante Studios in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network. Our staff includes Laura Rojas Aponte, Miguel Santiago Colón, and Lisa Cerda, with help from Paula Aleán, Diego Corso, Natalia Ramirez, and Elsa Liliana Ulloa. The CEO of Raambulante Studios is Carolina Guerrero. Executive producers at iHeart are Arlene Santana and Leo Gomez. Pablo Cabrera, Dylan Unger, and Mark Canton also serve as producers. Sound design, final mix, and theme song by Elias Gonzalez. If you like this episode, please share the word. Recommend The Moment to anyone who might enjoy unpacking these complicated times with us. And if you like The Moment, pero también te gustan los podcasts en español, check out Raambulante Studios. Our shows, Raambulante, El Hilo, and Central, are really worth a listen. I'm Daniel Alarcón. Thanks for listening.